welcome to the second part of this 8 recording in the Azure Demo Series. So in this particular recording, I'll proceed from where we stopped in the last one, which we do task 2, which is we use Docker machine to create hosts in Azure, and that will deploy the Docker toolbox for Windows. So what do we mean by this? What we mean by this is, let's go back to the diagram that we have up here. We have this machine now, which is the management machine that I'll be using. We have the Docker toolbox for Windows installed on this machine. So we're going to be using this component, which is the Docker machine. We're going to be using this components to deploy a machine on Azure that we can run containers in. So what will happen is we'll use this machine via the command line. We'll interface with it via the Docker machine command line, and you'll see that integration between Azure and Docker now, because what it will go is it will reach out to Azure and it's going to create this Ubuntu machine, and it's going to set up Docker on this machine. In other words, it's going to provision a Docker host that I can use to start deploying containers in Azure. And I'm going to be doing that for my management machine here via the Docker machine. So let's get into that. So that's the next thing that we're doing. That's task number 2. So very first thing that we need to do is go to the Azure Cloud Shell and get certain information from there. So ensure, by the way, I'll close this, ensure that you're logged into the machine, not into the lab machine, but into the machine that was prepared for us when we prepared to start this lab. So once we're here, what I'll need to do is I'll need to go to portal.azure.com. We need certain information. Let's log into that. Send my password. And go ahead and click yes to that. So yeah, I'm gonna bring up the Azure Cloud Shell just so I can get certain information from it. I could either click on this one to get the Azure Cloud Shell, and that will give me some of the options there. Or I could just open a new tab if I'm already logged into Azure and type in shell.azure.com. And that will take me straight to here. I'll select my directory, and that's going to start. So ensure that if this is set to PowerShell on yours, ensure that you select Bash and ensure that you're in the Bash Azure Cloud Shell. So we need certain information. One of the information that we want to get is we want to get account ID information from here. And there's a command in the lab manual that we will need to run. So if I go ahead and run that, and press enter. So it's going to give us this information here. So if I just type AZ account show without querying for the ID, it's going to give me a bunch of information, but this is the ID that I want this particular ID. So make a note of this ID and copy that. I'll go ahead and copy. I'll bring up Notepad and paste this ID there. Okay, so the very first thing that will, the very next thing that we'll do is to ensure that let's go ahead and paste the next command, and I'll make certain changes here. So I want to have a look and ensure that the Ubuntu version that we're going to be asking Docker machine to deploy is available in the region that I'll be doing my deployment. I don't want to start getting error messages because it's not available there. So let's go ahead and type that. So Azure VM image list queue. So it's going to list all the Ubuntu server images that are available in the West Europe location, which is where I'm going to be doing my deployment. And I want to make sure that 16.04.0 LTS is there because that's what I'll be asking Docker machine to deploy. So it's there, so that's nice. And that's good. After doing that, we don't need the Cloud Shell anymore for now, so we can close that. Leave the page. Okay, so the very next thing that we'll do is I have command prompt already open here, but if you don't, right click the start button and click command prompt admin. In this case, I'll modify the font to ensure that it's large enough for you to view and make it bold and click OK to that. Okay, so once you've opened this, what you want to do is to type the next command, which is cd user profile. Though that's changed to my user profile, which is c user student. Excuse me. So once I'm here now, so this is where we now begin to make use of Docker machine to access Azure directly. Let's copy the next command line and then I'll talk you through what that's doing. So first thing I'll do is I'll copy the command. I'll go to Notepad. Let's make this a bit larger. Let's make these 18. I'll do. And then I'll paste this here. I'll go ahead and click word wrap so we can see it. So you can see I'm using Docker machine, which is what we'll be using. Again, remember, do not forget this diagram. We have the Docker toolbox, and here we'll be using Docker machine to provision a Docker host on Azure. And Docker machine will integrate with Azure to deploy the hosts and ensure that the Docker engine and the Docker client are deployed on the host, and it's going to configure them automatically. So that's the sort of level of integration that we have across bots. So Docker machine creates driver Azure SSH user student, excuse me. Azure subscription ID, I'll need to modify this with the ID that I copied earlier. So I'll need to get my ID here and modify that with my ID. So Azure open port 80. So I'm specifying the port to open. So automatically Docker machine will integrate with Azure and create a network security group that has the rule with port 80 open. Whatever port I specify there is going to create the NSG to open that port. So Azure image, I specify the image that we already verified existed in the region that I want. I'll change the location to my region, which is West Europe. Azure resource group is going to create a new resource group 0702. Availability sets, we're going to specify what it's going to create and then specify the size. And once we have that, we can go ahead and run this. Now, remember that I'm doing this from within command prompt using Docker machine on my machine. So if I press that and if I type enter to that, it's going to say go to this URL and enter this code so that I can be able to authenticate and do the things I need to do. So that's Docker machine requesting for that. So if I go to that and get the code that I've been asked to enter. So let me expand this a bit. Let's copy this code. It says Docker machine for Azure. Go ahead and click continue. It says you'll be signed into Docker machine for Azure, blah, blah, blah. Click my account and it says you've already signed in. So if I go back to the command prompt, it should detect that I've already followed the instruction and signed in, and then it's going to carry on. And at the end of this, I'll have a host in Azure that I can deploy containers to. And all this was automatically set up by Docker machine for me. I hope that that makes a bit of sense to you. So what I'll do is I'll pause the recording to ensure that everything completes before resuming the recording again. And then after we come back, let's see what the next thing will do. So next thing that we'll do is exercise 2, where we'll deploy containers to the Docker hosts that we just deployed. So we'll configure a Docker machine environment to be able to talk to the new host that we just deployed, and then we'll go ahead and deploy containers straight from within a management system, excuse me, to the Azure VM. So let's go ahead and pause the recording and come back when it's done. Okay, welcome back. So that completed now. That took roughly a bit more than 12 minutes to complete. So if you have a quick look at the steps that it completed, you see that it deployed the Docker host, as I'll call it, deployed the Docker host in Azure, created all the Azure resources needed, set up the network security group and configured it, configured everything that's needed, and then went ahead to install Docker on the Docker host, ensure that the right certificates are copied to the machine, set up Docker configuration on the Docker client. So it's done all of that. So let's move on to the very next exercise and task. So now that we'll have our Docker host now, we can start deploying containers to the Docker host in Azure. And we'll carry on using Docker machine to do that. So let's go ahead and complete that. Okay, let's see. So what's the goal that we want to achieve with this one? The goal is to configure Docker client environment, first of all, in this task. Configure the Docker client environment of a management host to be our Azure Docker host. In other words, we want to configure a management host that we're currently on now and say to it that whatever Docker commands that we start to run now, we don't want you to be executing them just on the local machine. We want you to be executing them on the Docker host that we just deployed to Azure. And there's a bunch of other things that we'll need to do to that. Just to confirm a few things, let's check this. Let's go Docker machine ls. That will show us a list of Docker machines that we have. It's actually going to show us what the public IP address is for that machine. If we want to specifically get just the IP address, we can use Docker machine to get that for us. And it's going to give us the IP address. Also, if you want to verify connectivity to that particular host, what we can do is put in this command here and then modify IP address here to the IP address of our Docker hosts on Azure. And if I go ahead and type enter to that, and now I can't see anything, right? But what it's actually done is it ran this command, this ps command. So if you do docker ps, what Docker PS does is it shows a list of all the containers running on a machine. And this command I just ran now was executed on Azure host, Docker host that was just deployed now, and it ran it and said, oh, listen, there's no container that's running. So that's the next task. We're going to be deploying a container to that. So what we need to do, first of all, is run this command here, Docker machine env the name of our hosts, and we get a bunch of information here. So what we want to do is configure an environment to be that. So what we can do is copy this particular aspect of that. So I'll copy that and I'll paste that here, and I'll press enter to run that, and that's executed. So now if I just run the command to set Docker, I should see that my Docker environment has been configured for the hosts, the remote hosts, and that's machine name there, and it's using TLS for the encryption between them. So now whatever I start to run now, so if I run this, for example, docker run and then specify the ports, in other words, translate port 80 on the IP to port 80 on the container, and I'm running the nginx image. So that's what I'm trying to do here. What does this mean? What's going to happen? What's going to happen is, let's go back to this diagram, is that the nginx image, so we already have Docker on this. Let's get the nginx I think I have it here somewhere. Yeah, I'll just get this one here. Let's copy it. And oh, here we go. So it's going to deploy the nginx container on this machine. So it's going to deploy a container on this machine that's running the nginx image. So that's what that command will do, and it's going to deploy that. So Docker from this machine here will reach out and deploy it on this Docker host from here on this one. So that's what we want to do with this. So if I go ahead and run that, so it's going to check if that image is local. If it finds the latest version of the image locally, it's going to go ahead and use that. If you can't find it, it's going to go ahead and download it, which is what it's doing in this case. It's downloading that image from the Docker Hub. So you can see it's downloaded the latest image for nginx from Docker Hub on the machine, and then it's going to go ahead and deploy that. And that's done. That's completed, done now. So now if I run the command to list all the containers that are running, now we have this container running, not on our local machine, it's running on the Azure, on the Docker host that we deploy to Azure, because that's the environment that we're running this command, and that's done now. So if I go ahead and grab the IP address for the Docker host again, that's the public IP address for that. What I can do now is if I want, I can go to that public IP address and go HTTP that public IP address. And you can see it's got nginx running already within a container on the Docker host that we have. And that's really amazing, and that's very quick. So that's done now. So let's review where we currently are. So we've done exercise 1, we've completed exercise 2, which is deploy container to Azure VM. We've configured the environment, Docker environments to run on using the Docker host that we have in Azure, and then we've deployed a container that's running the latest version of the nginx image on the Azure host, and we've verified connectivity to that. So I'll go ahead and stop this particular recording. In the next recording, I'll proceed to exercise number 3, where we'll talk about deploying multi-container applications with Docker Compose. So what that means is this is like just really simple deployment that we've done. What happens if we want a multi-tier deployment where we have the web tier at the front end, and then we have the back end, which is running in the form of database. What happens if we want to do a multi-container application? Because applications are hardly just a monolithic single application that does not talk to anything else. So what happens if we have this multi-container application to deploy that uses multiple containers? How we would do that? We could use the method that we just used now to deploy the single one. Now that's will take us much longer. There's a better way to do that. We can use this component of Docker called Docker Compose, and we can use that using a compose file. We can use that to specify what our configuration will be, and the images to grab, the deployment to put on them, and then we can use that to deploy a multi-container application, which is what we'll do in the next recording. So I'll see you in the next recording.